Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today I'll be joined by two guests who will be speaking on the topic of ASD, specifically level one, in the classroom, their experiences with teaching children with diagnosed ASD. We'll be speaking with Nicole, who has years of experience teaching in the classroom, mainly primary school, but also a little bit in the high school setting. She worked really closely with children with ASD. She worked with their families, also with the Tasmanian education department, and she worked to help children with their studies during school who have diagnosed ASD. We'll also be speaking to Madi, who's a first year teacher straight out of uni. She specialises in English and history, and so she'll be talking on her experiences just being new to the classroom, how she works around and with children with ASD, what she currently knows and what she's hoping to learn in the future. So I think this podcast is really great. It gives us such a good insight to this topic, and I hope you get something out of it. Before we begin, I would just like to read a little excerpt from a student who's in school right now. His name is Josh and he's 15, and he just wrote briefly about his experiences with diagnosed ASD, how that is for him in the classroom, just so we can gauge a little idea of someone who's living through the experiences with this diagnosis. And then we can get into the professionals who teach these students day in and day out. So, hi, my name is Josh and I'm 15 years old, studying at high school with diagnosed level 1 ASD. It's not usually the work that's hard, it's the noise and everything happening around it. When the classroom gets loud or I don't understand the instructions well, I get really overwhelmed and give up quite easily. I enjoy learning, especially when I'm interested in the topic, but I do struggle to ask for help, and I also don't answer many questions in class, even when I have ideas. I have a couple teachers who make it easier for me to learn. They explain things clearly, gives me time to think, and help me not feel pressured when I'm taking my time. Because most of the time I can get it on my own, I just need time and maybe some extra instructions to help me understand better. So that was Josh, a 15-year-old with diagnosed ASD and his experiences at school.
So from your experience, how do you find that students with level 1 ASD typically process and retain information in a high school setting?
One of the things I think is really kind of pivotal to this conversation is that not all students who have an ASD diagnosis will present the same way. And not all students requiring level 1 supports will present the same way. So it's a generalized kind of answer that I'm going to give you, but I hope that it makes sense.
Yeah.
And the key, like with any teenager, like with any student, is to really try and connect with something that they are passionate about. So whether it's a particular football team and they are fascinated about it, or it's a movie that they are fascinated about, try and connect with them and build a relationship, and then build your learning around that as much as you can. So whenever they can make connections between the things that they are passionate about and prefer to talk about, try and connect that way, whether that's a personal connection or then a learning connection.
So students with level 1 ASD tend to interpret text more literally. How does that affect their understanding of things like themes and figurative language when talking like specifically at English, I guess, as a subject?
Yeah,
Or
I think generally speaking, yes, there is a tendency to take things more literally. Not everybody, but it is a common characteristic. And I think it would show up really clearly with things like sarcasm and idioms, or, common phrases, not understanding, not hearing and feeling that sense of sarcasm in someone's voice, thinking that they're just, oh, that was just a funny thing they said, but not knowing the nuance and being able to read deeper into that sarcasm. And then I've just talked about things like in novels or picture books, not always getting that theme and being able to read deeper into text. There may be a surface level understanding of the text.
yeah.
But being able to dive deeper can be challenging. But then also, if you can teach that writing has a series of rules and steps, the same as maths has a series of rules and steps, they're much more likely to find success in that English history space.
So my next question actually is like quite specific to math, but what patterns do you see in students with ASD and how they approach math? And like, why would you do some Excel and structured problems but struggle with word problems? And I guess this taps onto how one is a bit more structured.
I've also kind of approached it as a generalization. I would say that it's a yes and a no. Some students may be drawn to that idea of maths being more favourable than English, but then others are the other way. So I think maybe that's just more of a student thing than perhaps an autism thing. I'm not sure. But a couple of things that I've said for you is that black and white objective, it's right or wrong of maths, is sometimes easier to grasp and understand and connect with than the big picture subjective nature of English. And then the other thing that I've thought about when I was answering your question of the worded problems is sometimes worded problems are things like, you go to the shop to buy 6 bananas at blah, 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 and your student on the spectrum is going to say, I hate bananas. Why would I go to the shop and buy bananas? So there's no personal connection there. Maybe it's the words. Maybe it's the story, the narrative that's in the worded problem that becomes a roadblock. Sometimes it's literacy, and you'll see that for lots of students. The worded problems where they have to read the question becomes a literacy challenge rather than a pure maths challenge.
Yeah. Strengths, because I know that we talk about what they struggle with, but like what are the strengths that you commonly see with
and I'm so happy that you asked that question. When I would have been in the autism role and delivering professional learning in schools, it was always really important that I gave that flip side, that let's not get bogged down in the things that are difficult. What are the things that this little person brings to your classroom that actually show you their strengths and their positive qualities? And for me, the most important thing, and I see it in my own daughter, is this deep focus, this sense of concentration and focus on the things that are important to them. It may not be the things that are important to us, but given a task that they are connected with, they will spend a lot longer and go deeper with more interest and passion than any other person in the room.
Yeah.
Strong sense of social justice and fairness. They will stand up for the little person if they think something's not fair. They will stand up for their friend if they think something's not fair. They are super honest. They'll be the person that will say, it was her that did it, sir. It was him that took that. They're the ones that'll be honest and loyal.
Yeah.
Super, super observant. They'll notice anything that's changed. You got a new haircut, you've got new shoes on. Attention to detail and really, really observant about tiny little things that other people won't notice. Excellent recall of facts and long-term memory, particularly when it's linked into something that they're passionate about. And really creative, innovative thinking outside the box. How can I solve this problem? How can I do something in a way that is so different to the way that lots of other people will think?
Finally, just to wrap up, Nicole, what would you say is one thing that schools could do better to support students with ASD, or first teacher, like a note for first teachers at a uni?
I couldn't think of just one thing. If I've got a great big long list for you, and I'm happy to talk through a few, I think the most important is trying to build a relationship with the student and their family, depending on what your teaching role is and how much connection you've got with families. Say in primary school, for example, yes, you've got great opportunity to build a connection with family. They are the experts on this little person. They're the ones that are going to be able to give you lots of background information so that you can then work collaboratively. High school's different to that. The next most important thing is visual supports. Anything that's visual that you can provide takes a load of that executive functioning off their shoulders, and then they can just start to do the job. For example, at the start of your lesson, if you've got up on the board the equipment that they need, what they need on the desk, what your goals are for the lesson, what you're looking for, what your success criteria is going to be, instantly it's there. They know what's going to happen. Maybe you've got time frame down of how long you're going to be working on your task. So all of that stops being a question, and it can be put to the side. The best thing about a visual support is that it's in one place and it doesn't move. So I see a lot of teachers will set up their PowerPoint at the start of the lesson that will have all of those things on it, and then they go to the next slide to start the lesson, and all of those things are gone. So you're better off to have that written on your whiteboard or, on a display board next to your whiteboard, and it's there and it doesn't move.
So, welcome to our podcast, Madi.
Thank you.
As a first year teacher, what surprised you about how students with ASD learn or think?
I think every student is really individual and unique. Like, everyone is different and processes things differently. Especially with ASD students, their attention to detail, like they can see the real literal side of things. But going into depth, especially as an English and history teacher, they can sometimes struggle to kind of pick apart like deeper meaning of things.
Yeah, nice. And within your classroom, have you seen differences in how students with ASD engage with reading or writing tasks specifically?
Writing especially, I find sometimes the students I've taught with ASD are better with verbal responses. Writing their thoughts and their knowledge can be difficult. They can't really always, put into words what they're trying to communicate, which can be a struggle and feel unfair sometimes in assessment tasks because you know that they have a really deep knowledge of a topic, but when it comes to writing it down, it doesn't always, follow through with that.
And have you noticed any differences in focus, attention, or completing tasks?
Absolutely. You have to make sure your teaching is really explicit, which is good for all students, but especially students of ASD, because if you're verbalizing instructions or saying things too fast, it is not helpful. You need to have like clear routines. Like I always have a PowerPoint with direct instructions. Otherwise they can get overwhelmed and struggle and kind of shut down as well.
And I could imagine it would like pay to have like the same teacher as well, and like with getting to know your students, like how they learn and what helps them.
And it takes longer to build rapport with them as well, and like show them like that you're there to support them, and find out what supports are best for them.
So Madi, what's something you've learned that will shape your teaching moving forward?
I think always being adaptable with teaching, trialing new strategies and activities that might suit them better and that they will enjoy or improve their learning. Learning more myself as a teacher, taking on more PL with students with ASD and other needs as well. Forever learning myself and taking every opportunity to support those students.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for that, Madi.
Thank you.
Your responses were very insightful.
Thank you.
Boom.